Welcome to Master of Science with host Professor James McCanney. The good professor's career spans 50 years as a university teacher, scientist, and engineer. Each week, he will explore the rapidly changing world of science as many long-held theories are crumbling under the weight of new data. He will cover the fields of geology, archaeology, meteorology, oceanography, space science, astronomy, cosmology, biological evolution, virology, energy, mathematics, and more. So please welcome the host of Master of Science, James McCanney.
Good evening. Welcome back. And tonight, interesting, we have a Christmas show, literally, Christmas Eve, and what more important topic than might you imagine than talking about comets? Comets, the Christmas star was a comet. People will try and tell you that it was a planetary alignment, and I've talked about that on a prior show. No way it was a planetary alignment. It was a comet. And interestingly enough, people say, well, it was not seen by the for example, Herod's astrologers. Well, they had seen it, believe me. They knew that something was going on, and when the three wise men show up, it's like the gloves are off. Herod is like, okay, this is real. And of course, the history is very clear. He went out and, in his own way, tried to solve the problem by killing all of the young male babies in the whole area. And of course, Christ was able to escape to Egypt very early in his life. The parents, Joseph and Mary, took him to Egypt. But the original Christmas star story is very interesting because, you know, the three Magi story is so interesting because it wasn't one. If it was one, you'd say, well, happenstance, you know, okay. You could write it off as a chance, you know, some guy saw something. Two people see it, it's a little harder to explain away. Three people of the stature of the kings that came, we believe they were from Ethiopia and Persia and India, so a long ways away from Bethlehem. These guys had to pack up, bring their entourage, and travel possibly for more than a year, following something up in the sky. They discovered it in the east, they followed it to the west, and the rest is history. So the discussion of comets is very important, but the thing that is, there's just a tremendous amount of misinformation today, and it is pervasive. It is pervasive, and it's on talk show hosts, the big ones that are controlled, by the way, very controlled, talking about, for example, the comets hitting Earth or asteroids hitting Earth and causing damaging effects 11,000 years ago or something. It's pervasive, the amount of misinformation that is funneled to you, the public. Absolutely pervasive. So tonight, I want to talk about a topic that most of you have probably heard about, at least heard about. Many of you have heard about this extensively if you listen to radio or talk radio or whatever. And you'll probably note that my history on this topic goes back farther than anybody else alive today. Because it was my original work when I was at Cornell that basically found the theoretical, physical, discovered the physics of how planets and comets work, the big ones. We're not talking little ones. We're not even talking about little things that might crash into Earth. We're talking about big things that do not crash into Earth, but come by Earth on a regular basis. And so what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to take a number of my books And I'm going to go through them, and we're going to talk about this topic of Planet X. And as it's related to Earth-wide disasters, now we have, the thing you have to understand is that the tremendous amount of misinformation that flowed out in the year 2000 up to, actually started around 1995, when the CIA had already taken over NASA in 1991. I'll be talking about Robert Harrington and his discovery of one Planet X object that eventually became the nucleus of what we call the comet Hale-Bopp. I'll be talking about that. And so let me just list my books here and preface that by saying that we know that within the last 5,000 years, let's extend it out a little bit, say 6,000 years, roughly, because I don't pick dates. And there's a good reason for that, because here's what happens. Archaeology today has really a disorder, because they're constantly putting dates on things, and it turns out they're very wrong. So what happens? Then you have a new group of people that come in and pick dates, and those dates are even worse. And then they go on radio shows and talk about it, the Younger Dryas period, 11,000 years ago, and it's worse than what they're replacing. Because, as I said, we know that within the last estimate, roughly 6,000 years, there have been many major catastrophes on Earth caused by comets. This is not comets crashing into Earth, little comets crashing. No, we're talking large comets that come by planet Earth and wreak havoc with Earth. Some of them, we don't have a name for them, and I will list them. For example, the Noah's flood was the Earth passing through the tail of a comet for the period, they say 40 days and 40 nights. But biblical terms, we're talking about a large number. In the Bible, 40 was a large number, kind of like a billion is today. So 40 days and 40 nights of torrential rain. This is the kind of rain, this is worldwide. This is not just in the Mideast or where Noah built his ark or something. And the common thing that you hear today is that, there was a dam that broke in the Mideast and flooded the Mediterranean. Some kind of physical flood that because one body of water washed into another. No. It was a worldwide torrential rain flood. And the remnants of this flood are all over the world. So the Noah's flood is one of these events. And I made some calculations when the comet Hale-Bopp was here. The comet Hale-Bopp was in the solar system for a period of about 6 years, but it was a medium-sized comet. You wouldn't classify it as big. But it was much bigger than what NASA announced. NASA announced that it was about a 40-mile across nucleus. No, it was planetary size. And it was one of the best kept secrets. And now this gets us back to the three magi and the comet, because one of the big questions is, well, the Chinese didn't see the comet. The other people who were astrologers and studiers of the sky don't report a comet in that time frame when Christ was born. But just imagine this. The comet that Hale-Bopp was completely obfuscated from the public, and you could stand there and see it. It was up in the sky for 6 years, visible with the naked eye, day and night. And they were able to keep the public from understanding what that was. So that was the scale of misinformation that's been possible. So once again, you can't go by the records of the Chinese or other civilizations that were watchers of the sky because of the importance of that particular comet. A very unusual comet was predicted thousands of years earlier. And here you have the three magi seeing it in the east And as it crossed around behind the sun, they followed it to the west. Now, I talked about this previous show. Okay, so the Noah's flood, getting back to Hale-Bopp, if we would have passed through the tail of Hale-Bopp, Earth, planet Earth, it would have lasted about 40 days and 40 nights, and it would have been torrential rain, the kind of rain that you can't even breathe. The rain is so hard. I've been in rain like that in the tropics. It just rains so hard you can't see, you can't even hardly breathe. And that was worldwide. The ocean levels rose hundreds of feet during that time, and there was a serious mass extinction, especially of the world human population, but areas survived that. Okay, that's one. The next one is recorded all around the world, and the best person to really enumerate all of this was a guy named Emanuel Velikovsky, and this was when the original comet Venus was captured by the planet Jupiter, and there Velikovsky made a mistake. It was a tactical mistake. He said it flew out of Jupiter, which is not, comets don't fly out of Jupiter. They can fall into Jupiter, but they're not going to come flying out. So it was a tactical mistake, but the end result was what really happened is it was captured by Jupiter, a process known about in astronomy and astrophysics, a process of capture, where comets are captured, or other asteroids or planets even are captured by the twin star system, Jupiter and the Sun. And what happened is, as Venus grew to planetary size, by the tail buildup, and also the tail drag caused its orbit to reduce and become circularized inside of Earth's orbit. This occurred on Earth during what we call the Moses event, when Moses was leading the Israelites out of Egypt. So this is a second large-scale, Earth-devastating comet interaction. It did not hit Earth. It came by on 2 different occasions. We know that because of the Mayans. The Mayans recorded this. The Incas recorded it. It was in the Aztec tradition, although the Aztecs came later in history. But the Mayans definitely recorded Venus and tracked Venus as one of the deities, and one of the main deities of the Maya was Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent god of the night sky, whose heart became the planet Venus. Okay, so we know that was a second major event in history, and along with that one, there was a pole shift, where the pole shifted. Antarctica, what is currently Antarctica, was a temperate climate continent with a full population, and right now one of the great hidden secrets is the excavation of Antarctica. Also in history, we know about Atlantis, and we don't know if Atlantis went under at the same time or if it went under independently, but there again, the internet is full, and radio shows just full of misinformation about Atlantis, pointing over here, pointing over there, pointing there, on the roof, in the basement, any place but where it really is. It was literally discovered in about the mid-1990s in the South China Sea. And the Pillars of Hercules, talked about in the Greek legends, the Pillars of Hercules were Krakatoa and its sister volcano, the Plumes, from these volcanoes that were in the Sunda, what is now the Sunda Strait, between Java and Sumatra. That was the entrance into Atlantis, the main 5-ring city and small continent of Atlantis, and that's where it was. And it was excavated in the late 1990s by the US Navy submarines out of North Australia. And how do I know that? Because I discovered their website by accident. Probably should not have been there. But the U.S. Navy, with their submarines, were excavating Atlantis, and there's a secret excavation going on right now in Antarctica because there were the mastodons, the people, and pyramid-like structures in what is now Antarctica. Remember that when Columbus came across the Atlantic for the first time, he had a map that was an old map from the Phoenician mariners. And it showed the coastline of Antarctica without the ice on it. So that was back before the pole shift that those maps were made. There was also a passageway, open passageway, through what is now the North Pole. And remember, the North Pole, there's no physical island or land structure underneath the, there's no physical land structure under the North Pole ice cap. It's just floating there. In fact, U.S. submarines have gone underneath that ice cap. But in the days of Atlantis, that was open water. That was one of the worldwide passageways. Atlantis was a worldwide empire, and it went under, and of course that's another major event, and we don't know really what caused the, it may have been an individual slewing type of event where, like in the Canary Islands, where land is just sliding off into the ocean. People say that Atlantis is in the islands, the Canary Islands or the Azores, the islands off the west coast of Europe, but that's not at all. The biggest factors in understanding Atlantis are the Pillars of Hercules. 2 pillars, not one, not the Pillar of Hercules, like the Rock of Gibraltar, that's what they say, or the entryway into the Mediterranean Ocean. No, pillars, plural, 2. And these were the volcanoes, Krakatoa, and its sister volcano is no longer there because it exploded. But back in the days of Atlantis, the mariners could see those plumes hundreds of miles away, and that's how they knew, how all they had to do is get into that area, and at night they were lit up like big orange columns of smoke going up into the sky. And that's how they entered into Atlantis, through what is now the Sunda Strait, and weaving up, and this is in my book, Atlantis to Tesla, the Kolbrin Connection. But still, people are trying to tell you that it's off in the Atlantic Ocean or the Mid-Atlantic Ridge or all kinds of nonsense. But at any rate, the point of discussion here is that Earth has had major catastrophes based on large passing comets. The Noah's flood, the Moses event, the Venus event is another name for that. The 7 plagues prior to the passage of Venus, when the Israelites were being led by Moses out of Egypt, the 7 plagues are all characteristic of a large passing comet. But you have to understand, comets are not dirty snowballs. That is one of the biggest misinformation ploys ever dreamed up of by man. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is go through a number of my books and just give an outline, give a summary of some of the topics. And of course, the first book is Planet X, Comets and Earth Changes. This was a book that appeared about the year 1999, actually, was the first printing. And at the time, there was a huge misinformation ploy going on. And it was some of the craziest times in the history of science, let's just put it that way. And I talk about this in my books. I'm going to give you the titles of the various books here. It's the Planet X, Comets and Earth Changes book. Then there's Surviving Planet X Passage. It's a 60-page pamphlet that discusses what one would do if you, before, during, and after the passage of a large planetary comet, basically, because one of the big disinformation ploys that was set up by the intelligence agencies when they realized they did not want the public really to know anything about this. The big ploy was that Planet X would look like a big orange ball up in the sky. You would see it like this. And that's not true. Planet X will appear as a large comet. And so that's the real situation. And that's what they wanted to keep people from understanding. Let's look at the timing of the discovery of Hale-Bopp. It was discovered, according to the standard news media, in 1995. But it had really been discovered many years earlier by Robert Harrington at the Naval Observatory in his search for what was known as Planet X. It was funded by NASA. We have the NASA contracts funding Harrington, and he actually made the discovery. So the one Planet X object, of which there are literally thousands now that have been discovered. And so the idea that was kind of accepted or adopted by the public was that a Planet X object is going to cause damage to Earth. And it's really not true. Most Planet X objects, and there are many, will never have any effect on Earth at all. And as was the case with Harrington's discovery, which became the nucleus of Hale-Bopp. I talk about that in my books. And so it was a planetary-sized object that became the nucleus of a comet, was in the solar system for 6 years, visible to the naked eye in broad daylight. You could see it up in the sky. And so here's a planet forming in our solar system, and the intelligence agencies were able to keep the public from knowing that. Absolutely incredible. So you ask yourself, how could the Christmas star go unnoticed? And if the Chinese and all of these other entities knew the importance of the Christmas star, it would be easy to keep it from the public and keep it from public records, just like Hale-Bopp. That's such a perfect example. Here's a comet, a big comet that was this big in the sky. This is, huge. The size of, like this up in the sky. And nobody knew it. It was a planet forming in our solar system, and it's going to be back in another 2,600 years, and its orbit will decrease once again, and eventually in the next 10,000 years it'll become part of the solar system as a developing planet. So at any rate, Planet X Comets and Earth Changes was the first book. Surviving Planet X Passage was the second book. Atlantis to Tesla, The Colburn Connection was the third book, and I'll be showing the covers of these and the table of contents and going through them. And then there's the book called Principia Meteorologia, The Physics of Sun-Earth Weather, which these books are written for the general public. And they're in my education package. I want to remind you that I have hundreds of lectures in an education package that are designed for K-12 university students and their parents. Okay, so the next book in this series was called The Diamond Principle. And the Diamond Principle is kind of an expose on the position of man psychologically in the development of going into outer space. I have another book, it's called Comets, and it discusses just the very specific topic of comets. And then the last two books in this series that are relevant, there's a number of other books dealing with prime numbers, with the patented JMCC wing generator, but I'm not talking about those tonight. The other book in the Planet X series is called The Real History of Planet X 2020 Update. So this was a update that occurred in the year 2020, where I had a very good insight into everything that had happened over the past many decades dealing with this topic of Planet X. The disinformation, the promotion of this idea that comets are dirty snowballs and that can only be little, and maybe one will crash into Earth every now and then and cause some damage, but nothing big, nothing planet-sized. And so that's a huge piece of misinformation that's been pawned off on the public, and it's still rampant today. And then the final book in that series is called The Real History of Man and Earth, Myths, Magic, and Mayhem. That one is actually available on Amazon in a hardcover form. All the rest of these books are on my webpage, the jmccsci.com webpage, as ebooks, and some of them are available in print on the webpage also. Okay, so let's take a look at the table of contents here of this book, Planet X, Comets, and Earth Changes. Now, remember, this is coming out in around the year 2000. And when I write books, I write them for all ages. It's not a topic that was only relevant for a year or something like that. And the cover of the book, let me just show that again. The cover of the book is a Indian rock painting found at Green River, Utah. And a photographer, Gary Smith was his name, I believe he's deceased. He was in a wheelchair, and he would go out, I believe his friends would take him out, and he did photography of these glyphs at Green River, Utah. This one is from Green River, Utah, and from what I understand, these are blocked off now. You can't get to them anymore because of public causing damage. But you can see the shaman, and this shaman character appears in a lot of Southwest United States, and I believe around the world, and with the big eyes, and then with the arms outstretched, which is very interesting, the arms outstretched to indicate big. And then the little kind of monkey-like character off on the side also with his arms outstretched. And so you see two comets, and you see up on the nose of the comets this little squiggly line, which is characteristic of an electrical current in a magnetic field. And so these are very powerful electric fields with very high electrical currents. And then above the shaman is a snake with what appears to be a planet. And that's one of the descriptions, that when Venus, the comet, came by Mars, it extended out as if a snake had the planet in its jaws, and that was the electrical discharge with the auroras up in the upper atmosphere as it drew the atmosphere and oceans off of Mars, leaving Mars as the red hulk of a planet that we see today. Okay, so these are celestial disasters that were observed by the ancients. Prior to that event, Mars was a water planet. And so this very likely could be a depiction of that event. Now, the other thing is, you see there's two comets here, and there are indications that in history, and this comes from also from the Kolbrin, which I'll talk about extensively in a future show. I'll just give it a passing comment in this show. As I said, I was one of the first 3 people in the country to receive a copy of the Kolbrin, and from the people who originated that book. And the reason they gave it to me was because they wanted me, as a scientist, to interpret it. And the real interpretation is that there were multiple large comets in the sky at one time in ancient history. And they did extensive damage to planet Earth. But you'll notice in the picture here that the comet on the right, you can see the nucleus. And it's on the scale of the comet. So we're talking something potentially 5, 10, 20 times the size of planet Earth in the comet. So at any rate, this is Planet X, Comets, and Earth Changes. Now what I'll do is step through the various other books, the covers, and then we'll go into the table of contents. Okay, this is the cover of the book Surviving Planet X Passage, a supplement to the text Planet X, Comets, and Earth Changes. And this is a photograph. It was taken by a friend of mine of of a tower, one of the big major buildings. I think it's called the IDS Tower in downtown Minneapolis on a summer storm, and was able to capture this photograph and gave me permission to put it on the cover of one of my books. But this is gives you an idea of a very powerful thunderstorm lightning bolt from an Earth-based storm system. But now imagine an electrical discharge from a passing comet. A comet that would give an electrical discharge that could literally blow buildings apart, completely vaporize that building. And so anyway, this is the book Surviving Planet X Passage, a supplement to Planet X, Comets, and Earth Changes. Okay, so here's the cover of Atlantis to Tesla, the Kolbrin Connection. And now this is a book that I released in 2003. It was released in a number of locations. One was Coast to Coast AM interview with George Noory. And that night, this book sold $42,000 worth of copy in that one night. It was a very interesting event. Those are the good old days when books were sold like that. That doesn't happen anymore. But that was the introduction of the public to the Kolbrin, which is a collection of books from the Library of Joseph of Arimathea. And I've talked about that previously. And so Atlantis to Tesla talks about the technologies that were available in Atlantis and rediscovered by Tesla, and then my rediscovery of Tesla's work in explaining things that Tesla didn't even understand about, for example, where did the vertical electric field come from? But let me read the subtitle here. It is The Science of Atlantis and Tesla Are Rediscovered, Giving a Unique, Untold View of Life on the Lost Continent, Ancient Spacecraft Design, Unlimited Electrical Power, and the Secret Societies. And this also blew open this whole topic of secret societies as I discussed this, something that I had contact with. But I want to talk a little bit about the photograph here. This is from the SOHO satellite, the NASA observatory that observes the sun, and there's two comets here. And these comets come in, and there's this large solar flare that's extending out from the sun. And so what happens is the first comet comes by and just barely grazes the solar flare. The second comet comes and flies right directly through it, almost as if guided by some alien technology. And that flare turns into a gigantic explosion, the biggest explosion on the sun that we had ever witnessed. And of course, NASA said, oh, just coincidence. No, it wasn't coincidence. It literally proved my concept of the plasma discharge comet model and the effect that comets have on the sun. So at any rate, we'll talk about that in a minute also. Okay, this is the cover of the book, Principia Meteorologia, The Physics of Sun-Earth Weather. And this book started out as about 600 pages, a very in-depth physics book on weather created by electrical conditions in the solar system, which are powered by the sun. So I had to get it down to a palatable size for the general public. And so this book went from 600 pages down to about 300 pages as it is now. And the appendix of this book, one of the appendices, gives communications between myself and Russian scientists in the mid-1990s as we discussed my theoretical work and discovered the actual reason that hurricanes are the power source for hurricanes in the vertical electric field. And so the centerfold of this book, I believe it's 8 pages, it's high definition, complete surface of the planet Mars. And anyway, it also talks about the weather systems on all the planets. And so a very, very interesting book and very important in the series dealing with Planet X and comets and that entire topic. And so when one says Planet X, it rings of this woo-woo craziness and all of that. And of course, that was by design. When the intel agencies wanted to create something crazy, they do. Whether it's taking down a politician, whether it's criticizing parents for trying to raise their kids in a certain way, whatever it is, they can twist it into making the people sound crazy. And so the Planet X topic was no exception, where they took that topic of Planet X and made it into the craziest thing since anything. It was one of the crazier topics. In fact, they created personalities, they created people and actors to, the crazy lady that talks to aliens predicted that Planet X would crash into Earth on May 15th, 2003. And it was coordinated by NASA. NASA was giving her photographs. They were giving her information. The whole thing was based on a very rare full moon that on May 15, 2003, if this big full moon would rise up over the horizon and it would be the color orange, a very rare full moon. And they knew about this in the early 1990s, and that spawned this complete misinformation program and books with the big orange ball on the cover. Oh my goodness, it was just insanity. But anyway, my other book, the Real History of Planet X Update 2020, goes into all of that detail so that you would understand the real history of how all of this the Planet X topic and how it got completely sidetracked, and how they literally were able to hide a planet forming in our solar system, Hale-Bopp, that was discovered by the Naval Observatory in 1989, literally. That's the level of deception that they have over the public. So anyway, this book is basically a science book dealing with Earth weather and the formation of weather systems based on electrical activity of the sun. And now on the cover here, I believe this is Hurricane Floyd. And what I remember in a show or two ago, I was talking about the situation where I had predicted this hurricane 6 months in advance. It occurred in September, I believe it was September 6th of 1999. There was a small comet called Comet Lee. And that comet was visible in May of that year, and after doing my calculations and understanding the orbits of the planets, etc., I was able to determine that on September 6th, all of these electrical conditions and trigger mechanisms were aligning, and it would be a day for extremely severe weather worldwide, and that happened. This is one of the hurricanes that formed in a matter of hours. Hurricanes typically take days and weeks to form. These hurricanes, 60 of them formed around the world in a single evening, based on my scientific work and predictions. So anyway, but this book is not about catastrophic events. It's a physics book on weather created by solar electrical conditions. I just realized that I don't have a cover for the Diamond Principle. But anyway, the Diamond Principle, as I said, is a book that talks about the problems that man faces today, not technically regarding going into outer space, but psychologically and sociologically, what are the main issues of man trying to go into outer space? Here is the cover of the book called Comets, and it's a dissertation on the situation where NASA is intentionally hiding data, intentionally hiding the fact that they have visited 10 comets and there's no water, or ice, or snow on the nucleus of a comet. So their dirty snowball comet model is patently false. Yet they keep promoting it. And what's very interesting is NASA never says anything. NASA never, what they have are outreach people. People a lot of times with no degree at all that are pretend scientists. They're on the internet or they're on radio shows spouting about things, have no idea what they're talking about, but filling up airspace with nonsense and promoting this idea that comets are dirty snowballs. And so this book talks about the real situation with comets, that comets are an electrical phenomenon, and they are, small comets are in a sense different than large comets. Large comets have enough gravitational attraction where the electrical forces are bringing the material in, and the gravitational force is what keeps that material there. The small comets, the material is coming in from electrical attraction, but it dissipates, and it doesn't tend, if anything, it is baked onto the surface, but it really doesn't grow into very large entities, whereas the big ones grow at a tremendous rate because they have the gravitational attraction to hold the material once it's brought in. And so at any rate, Comets is an interesting book. Now the photograph here is 21 pieces of a comet. It was called Schumacher-Levy 9. And during the time that this comet was coming in to collide with Jupiter, something very interesting happened. As there were 21 pieces of this comet that broke up, and they're coming in towards Jupiter, and they're water comets, typical comet with a water tail. All of a sudden they get near Jupiter and they turn into sulfur dioxide comets, which the Russian scientists that were watching this, they said, yeah, this is exactly according to the Makani plasma discharge comet model prediction, that the tail material is based on the material in space locally. And around Jupiter, there's a lot of sulfur dioxide. It's a very common element in the region around Jupiter. That's why Jupiter is red. That's why Io, the main moon of Jupiter, is orangish red. There's a lot of sulfur dioxide. And so the these comet pieces turned into sulfur dioxide comets before colliding with Jupiter. And before they hit, they exploded. In other words, there was an electrical discharge from Jupiter out to these comets, and there was more energy in any one of these little pieces of a comet exploding than in all of the nuclear bombs on planet Earth. Now, the reason the Russians could tell this is because they were looking at Jupiter, and the moons that were behind Jupiter reflected those X-rays with such intensity they could measure those reflected X-rays on planet Earth. And so it's clearly, once again, not an ice ball comet model, not an ice ball, certainly nothing that a little ice ball would do. In fact, NASA's prediction was that they would burrow into the atmosphere of Jupiter and wouldn't do anything. So NASA didn't even train any telescopes on it at all, whereas the Russians had all the equipment they had available trained on Jupiter to see what would happen. So at any rate, this is the book Comets. Once again, and remember, the reason I'm talking about this is because planets form from large comets. They're captured into the solar system, they work their way into the solar system, The drag of the tail is what slowly causes their orbits to circularize and become stable circular orbits. It's the tail drag. And that's one of my main discoveries from my original work when I was at Cornell. So here again, once again, this book, Comets, instrumental in understanding the very nature of comets. Okay, so here is the cover of the book I was talking about, the Planet X Update 2020, The Real History of Planet X. And this book that I wrote in 2020 goes through all of the details of the history and going back to the original terminology, Planet X. Planet X is an astronomical term that is related to astronomical bodies that have been discovered, been observed, or been predicted because of astronomical conditions that that has not been named. Now, the astronomical community has a Congress that meets and actually assigns names to astronomical bodies based on Greek mythology primarily. So all the names of Mercury and Venus and Mars and Jupiter, Zeus, Saturn, etc., Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, are all names that come from Greek mythology. And so the Astronomical Congress votes and determines the names of objects that were planetary size, and before they are named, they are designated as Planet X. And so also, since there were 9 planets, Mercury, Earth, Venus, Earth, out to Pluto, there were 9 planets. Anybody, excuse me, anybody who discovered another planet would then have found planet 10, because we already have 9 planets. But then they had this funny business where they demoted Pluto from being a planet so that they wouldn't have to call it Planet X, because X has a double meaning. Planet X indicates a planet that hasn't been discovered or predicted, that still has not been named by the official astronomical community. It also means the Roman numeral 10, the 10th planet. And so to avoid calling anything new the 10th planet or Planet X, they demoted Pluto from being a planet, and then they said, oh, well, now we're searching for Planet 9, a little game that was played by NASA, still playing that little game. And the other odd thing was that about the same time, they started discovering planets in the solar system out beyond Pluto. Not 1 or 2, thousands of planets. So now all of a sudden they had the quagmire of all of these planets out there, and there's not planet 10, there's planet 11, 12, 13, planet 1000 of planet 1009. And so at any rate, this book goes through that history. And so this is a very important book to read to understand the tremendous amount of misinformation and then the real story. And just to summarize, the real story is that Robert Harrington, at the behest of Tom Van Flandern, who was an assistant at the Naval Observatory, gave the impulse to Harrington to search for Planet X. So they went to NASA and they got funding to do the research. And in fact, Harrington in 1989 made the first observation of what they called Planet X. He wrote it up in a scientific publication and gave it back to NASA and said, we have discovered this. 1990 and 1991, they've got further data on this object. It was down in the solar system, and this is what had been pulling down on the planets Uranus and Neptune that had been searched for since the 1700s. And so the Herschel brothers, or the father and son, were instrumental in locating the planets Uranus and Neptune, and eventually Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto. All of these people looking for Planet X, this object, Harrington finally discovered it, And in 1989 was the first photograph. And by 1991, they had enough photographs to understand two things. It was Earth size or larger, and it had a companion. The companion allowed them to calculate the mass. So they knew that this was larger than Earth in terms of mass. It was moving into the solar system, and it was on a near direct collision course with Earth when it exploded into brightness and became the nucleus of the comet Hale-Bopp. So in other words, the object, the Planet X object that Harrington discovered, became the nucleus of Hale-Bopp with its companion and was up and visible in the night sky for years, in the daytime sky even. I remember seeing it in the daytime sky, visible, this comet, and it was becoming a planet, and the intel agencies were successful in keeping the public from knowing this that entire time. So anyway, this book is the book that takes you through the entire history, that craziness in the 1990s, 2000s, and just insanity, using large talk shows to promote misinformation, unbelievable. Okay, this book is the last in the series, and it is called The Real History of Man and Earth, Myths, Magic, and Mayhem. Now, this incorporates a lot of the material from the prior books, but I want to go through the table of contents here a little bit. And the whole issue here, is that archaeology, traditional archaeology, has really messed up on putting dates on things. Things like the Egyptian pyramids, on the history, the prehistory of the Maya, and other races that lived in civilizations that flourished in Mexico, what we now call Mexico, etc. But then the problem is a whole new group of people come along and then put dating, which is probably worse, and try and feed this to you, the public, on the large talk show, radio shows that are everybody listens to. So at any rate, I just want to talk about a couple topics that are covered here. Chapter 5, the Standard Science and the Pyramid of Knowledge. Now, in the world of standard science, there are certain, I call them axioms of astronomy. In other words, the idea that the universe began in a Big Bang and all of what you see was just random. It eliminates the need for a designer or a creator or someone that is in charge of this immense, complicated universe that we live in. And then that the solar system formed all at one time 4.5 billion years ago. Absolutely incorrect. The solar system is updating all the time. And planetary formation is somewhat rare, but we have historical events in which Hale-Bopp was a planet that is in formation in our solar system. Then we have the Venus, the comet, becoming planet Venus in recent historical times, certainly within the last 5,000 years. And so these people that are running around talking about, say, the Younger Dryas epoch, 11,000, they claim 11,000 years ago. I don't know where they get these dates from. Once again, they're replacing dating that was very incorrect with other incorrect dating, because we know for a fact that many Earth disasters have happened in the last 10,000 years. And that's what the ancient Egyptian priest cults were telling the Greeks. When the Greeks, Solon went back to Egypt to ask, where is our history? Where do we come from? They said, yeah, you don't understand. The Greeks, you don't have any history because you were wiped out along with the continent of Atlantis. That's where the tale of Atlantis comes from. And they specifically say that over the last 10,000 years, we've been wiped out 5 different times. Major Earth-wide catastrophes, 5 different ones. And so people today are interpreting that to say one event 11,000 years ago, and it's just totally incorrect. And so anyway, standard science is what you would see out of NASA or in a standard astronomy textbook in college. I taught astronomy at the university level, and I did a study. This is 1991. You can see the video of me as a very young person giving this video analyzing 21 different astronomy college level textbooks and university college level, and all of them repeated pretty much the same thing. I had my students help with the study, and the end result was that there's a corroboration of knowledge, and nobody can walk outside that line. And this falls down to you, the public. So anyway, the standard science and the pyramid of knowledge, I call it. An asteroid hit it. Okay, now this is pervasive today again. You have people, and I hate to say it, they really don't know. They're digging up information from decades and decades and decades ago, which wasn't true then, it wasn't true now. That somehow an asteroid hit Earth. If you need something to happen, if you need a disaster to explain, or if you need a comet explosion to explain, an asteroid hit it. And it's almost comical. It's almost ridiculously comical to see people talking about asteroids, and that is a problem. I'm not saying it isn't. But the big major events, formative events in man's history have come from large comets that pass by Earth. They don't hit Earth. They don't even, in a lot of cases, they don't even come that close to Earth, but can cause what I call action at a distance. So there's electrical effects, magnetic effects, gravitational effects, and then other effects that happen when we pass through the tail of a comet or on the nose side of a comet. Okay, so an asteroid hit it is kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of saying that the people who are promoting asteroids colliding into Earth to cause catastrophes don't know what they're talking about. Misinformation and controlled opposition. This is a huge topic because misinformation is rampant, but whenever the intel agencies want to control information, they create both sides of the story, of the dialogue. They create both sides. They create the standard science side, and then they create the crazy side over here. And nobody else gets to talk. This is what gets presented in the fake news media. And believe me, the science news media has been fake for a long, long time, along with the political arena. Fake science news has been with us for since, for decades and decades, for centuries, literally. And you find this even in the Middle Ages, where they promoted the flat Earth. You know, people running around claiming the Earth was flat. And people are still doing it today. They're still getting away with it. So the misinformation and controlled opposition, Chapter 7, very important. The discussion of how long do artifacts last. And this is very important because people go around dating structures. They go, oh, this was 11,000 years ago, or this was 5,000 years, or this was during the dynasty of certain pharaoh. You know, and really, they don't know. And so one of the biggest points of this book is to stop, I repeat, to stop putting dates on events, especially archaeological events and anthropological events. Stop trying to put dates on things. And the other thing is, it is now very clear that man has been in his current form on this planet for a very, very long time. and did not evolve from the apes. So at any rate, that's chapter 10. Did man evolve from the apes? Does man have a spirit? Very interesting question that goes along with the development of man and man on this planet. How do the planets form? Chapter 13. And this gets back to the entire topic that I'm covering tonight, that the planets formed individually, as did Earth, as did Venus, more recently, as did Mercury, and they form from large comets that are captured into the solar system. The tail drag reduces their orbit, and then they fall into these beautiful circular orbits. That is the process of planet formation, not a dust cloud that's accumulating at a single moment in time.
This has been Master of Science with host James McCanney. Join us each week as James will delve into historical figures such as Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and the great mathematicians as we explore the history of man, Earth, and our universe as you've never seen it before. Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.